Okay, welcome back. I've been working on the truck a little bit, and it's really been giving me a hard time. So, some of it's self-inflicted, some of it's not. But this thing is going to fight me every step of the way. It has been since I started, and it's just going to continue to do that, I think. So, looking back through the timeline, I started working on this thing, doing this swap and all this stuff in like January, February, and we're in July, and I haven't really even gotten very many successful drives with it yet. So I got the intake swapped out, and then I broke the rod. So then I pulled everything out, put a new engine in it, rebuilt the thing, put a new engine in it, went to go drive it the other day, and just kind of starting to get into boost a little bit and was having issues with it not wanting to make boost. Then all of a sudden I did a pull, and it just stopped reading any boost. Ended up coming home and I found that my map sensor was blown out of it. So this is like the nicer 3-bar brick style map sensor. It was stuck reading 92 kPa only. It was just sitting there and it blew the map sensor out of it. So I've never had that happen before. But as I said in the other video, I put my boost controller and map sensor and everything underneath the intake for cosmetic reasons, so it would be underneath there. And the first time I took it out to go drive it, it bit me immediately because I had to pull all that shit back out. But just little stuff like that like never really happens, is happening. I also did make and modify this wrench. It's a 1-inch wrench, and I just kind of cut it shorter and ground it open so I could actually get to the fittings back there. So like the AN fittings, I can actually get back down there now. So I tried to tighten them before and I found the leaks. I think I talked about them in my last video. 2 of the fittings were leaking and they were tight, but they needed to be a little bit more tight. So that's what I made this for. Reefed on those fittings and then they stopped leaking, so that was good. I didn't have to change any of the fittings. But now with that tool, I'm actually able to remove the crossover and then I should be able to pull the stuff out. So making that tool kind of solved my issue that I had that I talked about in the other video of not being able to take the intake off and put it back on with the fuel rails attached. Now I'll be able to do that because I can remove the crossover. So just kind of going through and finding stuff like that and fixing things. I also totally biffed my drain line when I built this thing. So you can see it's actually rubbing right on the flange. Good thing I caught that right away on the first drive before it actually started leaking or anything. What ended up happening was I attached the line and that fitting with the center section and the compressor housing off, and then I put it all on in one assembly and I never even checked the fit. I used to have a 90-degree fitting coming off of it so it would stick out a little bit more, and it didn't hit before, so then I just modified that. I put a straight fitting on it and it was hitting down there. So I noticed that, caught it ahead of time. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to use this. It's just like a little piece of conduit. And I'm gonna make a little flange that goes into the bottom and it's gonna stick out to the side and then try to run it down and through the same spot. I like the routing that I have, so I'm gonna do that, but I am gonna have this thing coming off of it now. So we'll get working on that thing. And then I also think I am going to take the boost controller and stuff and bring it out, just because it's really hard to access. Okay, so I did finish up the drain line. I'm just going to a hose clamp there to the braided line, and then I did make a little flange and I welded that tube to it. So I was going to use this nice fresh piece of flat stock here to make the flange, but this old cam retainer plate that is the same thickness was just going to be thrown in the garbage. So I ended up cutting the flange out of the old cam plate. It already had one of the holes, like the bolt hole there. So I just kind of drew it around that bolt hole, cut the section out of it, and then welded the tube to it. Well, I do like this thing a little bit more than the AN fitting. The AN fitting's kind of big to get in there, so it's hard to get on. So it's hard to get in there and tighten it with a wrench. You almost have to like tighten it with this all disassembled and then assemble it. So as far as accessing it while the turbo's together, it's a lot easier to do it this way, and that's not going to be a pressure source, so I'm not worried about that coming off or leaking. And the way that it comes down, I positioned it so it's away from the flange, and then the hose is actually down past the flange, so it should be far enough away from heat. And then I only have the one AN fitting on the bottom, but it's one of these guys, so it's kind of one of those long radius 90s, so that should be a lot better. Now I'm going to start pulling the boost controller out. I have one wire here going to the alternator. I'll pull that out and then I'll mount it somewhere in this area, and then I'm going to start with just doing one line to one wastegate. So I have both wastegates hooked up right now, and I'm going to try to just do one on one side. I was kind of having issues with like a wide open throttle turbo flutter, and I want to see if I can try to solve that issue. So that was one of the reasons I put the intake on, so I could try to get it to flow better. So I want to see if maybe it's a wastegate issue, because it seems like it's starting right as the wastegates are opening, the turbo will start to flutter. It's like it'll make a little bit of boost, but it never really lights off. So it's acting like it's basically doesn't have anywhere to go with the air, or it's not being driven enough on the turbine side. So something's going on there, but I want to get it all back together, test it with one wastegate, and see what we can do. All right, so I'm doing a check on the vacuum lines because I'm adding the boost controller right now. So I just checked the bottom line. Bottom line is good, but the bottom line is also wrapped in fuel line. So I usually use like a 3/8 fuel line or something and run the vacuum line through it when I'm running it through stuff or it's by a heat source. Especially on the bottom line, because if the bottom line breaks, you're basically pinning the gate shut, and you can spike the boost pretty bad. So the line that I had going to the top, I just checked it and it's actually leaking. So right there you can see that spot. So I don't know if it got rubbed. It doesn't look like it's melted. It definitely got rubbed through. So what happened with that one? That one might have actually rubbed on the drive shaft a little bit, because this is the line here, and then this is the line here, and I think I had too much length in the lines, and then when I put it underneath the intake, it pushed down and it kind of sagged because it had a loop in it before. So I think it might have rubbed on the drive shaft or something. And I really wanted to check that, because the last time I drove it, when I blew the map sensor out of it, it wasn't making any boost. So it was only making like 5 pounds, and I was adding boost controller and it wasn't changing. And before it was making around 18 pounds at 65% duty cycle, and there I had it at 75 and it was only making like 5 pounds. So I thought I might have had an issue with the reference to the top of the gate, and there's a big hole in it. Okay, so got everything in and pretty much done now. I got the turbo blanket on there, got the new drain finished, and really what I did up here was, so essentially before I had it going down into a T. So what I did was I added this vacuum block, and now I have one going over the map sensor. I switched the map sensor out for the one that was on the Ranger. Same brick 3-bar style, but this one seems like it's a lot better quality, and I was using this one on the Ranger for a while, so I just took it over there because that guy has a bad transmission. So then I also built this little bracket for the boost control solenoid, so that's all out and available now. So I can access everything if I need to. I redid that one. So I redid that top line going down to the top of the gates, and I wrapped it in some fuel hose. I ended up just cutting it all the way down the length of the hose and then wrapped it around. So that's all looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with how it looks. I just hope it all works okay and doesn't break again soon anyways. I also did swap out the oil, so I did do like a break-in oil because of the new cam bearings. So I just did like some O'Reilly's 530, and then I drove it around for probably an hour or whatever. I drove it for the other day, swapped that oil out. I put some VR1 2050 in it now with a new Wix filter. I started going through and checking all the injectors to verify that all the injectors are working with Noid lights, but then back where that bracket is, I couldn't get the plug off, so I just said screw it. I'm just gonna check it with the IR temp gun, infrared temp gun, and make sure all the cylinders are firing, just make sure everything is good. Then if all goes well, I think there might be a track day tomorrow. So I don't want to get too excited for it, but it would be nice to at least try to go make one pass, even if it's a slow boy, just to get it out there. All right, guys, so it's actually a couple days later now. I did take this thing out and drive it a little bit. I was having issues with my GoPro and was kind of short on time, so didn't really film much of it, but I did get some cell phone clips. I did figure out what that surging is, that surging pulsing noise. It was my wastegates. So the whole time I thought it was the turbo. So I spent a lot of time like looking into compressor surge and what would cause it, and I changed a bunch of different stuff, and none of it was really working. So then I started looking at the wastegates, and I ended up changing the boost controller frequency from 15 hertz to 60 hertz just to test it, and then the noise completely went away. And I have some videos, I'll put some videos in here. So this will be at 15 hertz with it surging, pulsing, and you can see at like 119, 120 kPa it starts pulsing really bad. And here's the video without it pulsing. This is at 30 hertz. So a little bit annoying that I went through a lot of work and testing just to figure out that it was something really small that I could change and fix it. But I'm glad it wasn't an issue with the turbo or with the setup that was causing the turbo to do that. Because if it's actually wide open throttle compressor surge, it can wreck the turbo pretty quickly. So I was kind of worried about that. So I'm really relieved now that it was just the wastegates doing that, even though the whole process was a little bit frustrating. So also I did end up moving all that other stuff, the boost controller, map sensor, added a vacuum block. I did all that stuff because I was troubleshooting this issue. So in the end, it's better than it was before, and I feel like I'm pretty happy with the setup now. So it has the Bosch 210 injectors, everything's out from underneath the intake. I do like how everything looks. So now I just got to drive it for a little bit longer and see if it's going to leak at all from crankcase pressure. I did add that big catch can to hopefully avoid all that stuff. So if it doesn't leak and it doesn't break, I'll be pretty happy with this setup. But now that I said that, it'll probably do all those things. So other than that, next thing is going to be basically like charging the air conditioning again, because I redid the line. So I might actually buy the tools and do that myself, like buy the vacuum pump and do all the stuff to do that. Because I did recently buy an AC line hydraulic crimping tool, so I'll be able to make AC lines. So I might as well go ahead and buy the vacuum pump and the tools that I need to recharge anyway. So that would give me a lot more capability if I'm, doing custom swaps and building AC lines. Then this thing would have AC again. I do want to clean up a little bit of the wiring inside here. I still got like some of the TAC module wiring and all that stuff from some testing I was doing, so I think I'm gonna rip all that stuff out. And then the only other thing I want to do is I want to get the speedometer hooked back up, because when I was having issues with the trans brake, I thought maybe it was a speed sensor signal issue, so I wanted to verify that. So I ended up unhooking the speedometer, so I just got to reconnect the wire. Then it should be good there. But other than that, we'll get this video up. Hopefully we can go to the track this week. It is actually the weekend now. Friday was closed, so I'll go next Friday, hopefully. And then I'll probably take it out during the week this week and test some of the launch control stuff. I'll probably try to see if I can get it to build like 6-8 pounds on the brake. Right now, the way it was set up, it was only building like 1 pound, but before it was building 6 before I did the boost controller changes. So I know I can do it, just got to get it back there. Hopefully we can launch it on 6 pounds and then run like 18 to 20 at the track. That'd be kind of cool.